In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at a few quick tips and features within Studio One 7, and a lot of these come up within meetings that I have with students. I do provide one-on-one training over Zoom directly with me for Studio One, so if you're interested in that, you can check out the pinned comment below or the description area of this video. But just know that a lot of these come up pretty often when I'm having lessons with students, so that's where they're derived from. So I hope you're going to find something useful here. There's also an index below in the pinned comment, so if you want to skip to different sections that maybe you're more interested in, you're welcome to do that. But we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this. Now, the first thing we're going to take a look at is going back in time, so to speak. So you may be working on a song and you're spending a few days or weeks on it, and you reach a point where you're not happy with it, but you can't undo your changes, and you wish that you could just go back in time to a previous state of the song where you were more happy with the progress you had made. So here we have all of our recent files to the left here, and if I were to right click here on this second one, then you can see that we have a bunch of auto-saved versions that we can choose from. Now we can see on the right hand side, we can see how long ago it was, the particular day, the date, and the actual time. So here you can really hone in on a particular day where you were happy with the song and you'd like to go back there. You can just select it and then that's going to load up. Now the next thing we'll take a look at is within the same menu here, and that is open with options. So I'll go ahead and click once here, and we can see that we have a little dialog here, open Automata with safety options. So this can be useful if you are trying to open a song but it is crashing Studio One or it's stalling out, it's just not opening for you. Here you have some options that can help you out. So you can choose to not load Presonus plugins or third-party plugins. This can be a big issue with a song if it's not loading properly. So you could just check the box, click OK, and then your third-party plugins will be disabled. So we also have some other options for disabling the ARA support, profile document loading, and profile document saving. So these particular options can be really helpful for you if you need to troubleshoot a song that is problematic. But we'll go ahead and cancel out of here. We'll go ahead and right click again. And a lot of students ask me, how can I get to my actual song file within my system? And then down at the very bottom here, we have show and explore. Now I'm going to need to press Shift and F to exit out of full screen mode. Let's right click again, show and explore. Now this is going to open up the Explorer on Windows or the Finder on the Mac, and this is going to take us directly to that folder for Automata. Now it takes us to inside of that folder. We're within that folder. So a lot of times people may want to delete a song that they no longer want to keep. So we need to come up one level. I'll go to Finish Tracks. Now we can see the entire folder is here, and I can delete that song if I'd like, or do some other management within the Explorer window. But we'll go ahead and close that out. Let's Shift and F again to go back to full screen. Now I'm going to press Control and N to bring up the new songs dialog. And one quick thing that I want to mention here is that if we scroll down, we have stretch audio files to tempo. Now I can't remember if this is selected by default or not. I have this turned off because I do mixing and I don't want to alter my client's files. So I just leave this off for convenience for that purpose. But just be aware that if this is selected and you import files, audio files that have BPM data embedded into it in its metadata, then those files are going to be stretched or compressed to fit the tempo that you've selected here. So just be aware this is something, it's kind of hidden, especially if you don't have this expanded out with the disclosure arrow. And it's down at the very bottom. So if you're importing audio files and they're just being totally messed up as far as their tempo, you'll want to check this area here. Now we do have the ability to turn this off within the song after it's created, the stretch feature, and we'll probably take a look at that once we hop into the song, but I just wanted to mention that briefly while we're here. So let's go ahead and click on OK and hop over to the song page. Now I see in a lot of comments that people will sometimes feel overwhelmed by all the different options and features and buttons that are available within Studio One. A recent new feature is that we have the ability to customize what we're seeing here up in the toolbar for our browser tabs within the inspector as well as the transport. So I can right click here in the toolbar and we have customize. I can also right click within the inspector, or I can right click on a tab at the top of our browser, or I can right click in the transport bar and select Customize. Now this is going to bring up our customization window. Let's close out that inspector. By default, this is going to be on complete, so we're seeing everything that is available. Let's extend this out a bit. But you can see here that we have these check marks, and we can just deselect these to choose. So if I were to start removing some of these, take note in the transport area below, we can see that these items are being removed, and this is being stripped down here, a more minimal view. We also can come up to the top here, this drop-down menu, and we can go back to the complete. We also have basic. We can see that this is changing here. We can choose minimal, and we have audio editing. Now, you've seen that we can make our own selections here, and you can save that by clicking on the paper icon. You can store it. You can rename once you've saved something, or you can delete something that you've saved. Now, I've already done that, and so at the very bottom here, I have Quanta 1, so I'll go ahead and select that. And then this is what I've personalized for the particular buttons and actions that I use on a regular basis. And finally, just note that we're on the transport right now, but we can click on the Inspector tab and choose what we're going to see in our Inspector area. We've got our toolbar, and we've got our browser. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that out. And let's hop over to our browser, and we'll come over to the Effects tab. And when we are installing different effects or plugins, oftentimes we'll have the option to choose whether we'd like to install Clap, VST2, VST3 during that installation wizard for the particular plugin. But sometimes we don't have that option. So for instance, with the Softtube, if I expand this out, they have a download manager and installation manager, and within that process, you don't have the option to choose what's being installed. So here I've got duplicates of the same effects. If I click once to select this one here, we can look in the information panel down below, and we can see that this is a VST3 version for this particular compressor. If I select the bottom one here, we can see that that's VST2. This is the same for our Vice Exciter. This top one is the VST3. The bottom is the VST2. Now, I don't need all of these. I just would like to work with the VST3s. So let's come back to the Home tab by clicking on that little house icon. And then down at the very bottom, we have Plugin Manager. Let's click once on that. Let's pull this over to the center. And here to the left, this is another new feature, relatively new. We can choose the plugin format priority, and you could just left click, hold, and drag to however you'd like for these to be. So I've got Clap as the Clap format as the #1 priority, and then VST3 and VST2. But we also have this hide duplicates on startup, so I'll go ahead and check that. And then once we check this and restart Studio One, then it's going to hide those duplicates and just show whichever one, if it's available, if the particular plugin or has a Clap version available, we're just going to see that one. If it just has VST3 and VST2, then we're just going to see the VST3, at least for how I have this set up here. So again, this is going to take place after Studio One is restarted, but just while we're here, know that we can come to the plugin managing area here, and we can see that the compressor, that Softtube Chandler Limited compressor, we can see the VST3 and VST2 versions here. And if I were to deselect here, let's go ahead and close out of this window, come back to our effects, and we can see that that second one has been removed, and now we're just left with the VST3 version. Now we can also right-click on the particular plugin, and we can choose to hide it from this menu here as well. So if you just have a handful of plugins that are duplicates, then you can use this method. But if you've already got a lot installed and you've got tons of duplicates everywhere, the other method that I showed is going to probably be your more efficient method to clean things up. Now let's come back to our Effects tab, and we'll go ahead and drag this compressor in as well as our Exciter, put that on the same track. And let's come to the Klanghelm, and we'll drag a couple of these in as well, all being loaded onto the same track just by dragging and dropping. So now let's open up in our inspector by clicking on the eye here, and I'm going to press Shift and E to zoom in vertically on our track. Now we can see all of our plugins here, and a lot of the students that I work with, when they wanted to see the plugin, they'll double click here and to show these. But just know that we have up at the top these tabs. So if I click on the compressor, then we can see that. Here we have our exciter, then we have our other compressor here. Now this is kind of a narrow view, so we'll need to click on the ellipsis button to see the MJUC. And also know that we can hover and use our mouse wheel to navigate between these plugins as well. Now another cool feature for working with our plugins is the macro controls. So we can see this center icon here, the little circle, this knob. If we click once on that, this is going to take us to our macro controls. I'll click on this downward facing arrow, and we have some XY pads here. And so we can assign various parameters from one plugin or multiple plugins to one or multiple macro controls. So let's click on the wrench icon and take a look at how we can make our assignments. So let's come to the compressor. Here's our left input. I'll double click on that. That's been added. We'll come to the right input and add that as well. Let's exit out of the edit mode. I'm going to click on the pin icon to make this stick around. Let's double click on our compressor. So now when I turn this one macro control, let's move that a bit out of the way. Take note, these are our left and right input controls. And we can see that they're both being moved by this one macro control. Now, these are linked at the moment, so they would be moved anyway. But if I unlink these, we can see we can still move both at the same time. Now, this one macro control is being directed to this particular plugin. But if we come back to the wrench icon to open up the edit area, let's close out that folder for the compressor. Let's take a look at the DC1. Let's expand that out, and let's double click on its input. So that's been added. We'll exit out of edit mode, and let's double click here. This is our DC1. Let's pin that. Open up our compressor again. We're kind of running out of real estate here. So now when I turn this one macro, take note of the input left and right on our compressor as well as the input on our Klanghelm, we can see that all three of those knobs are being adjusted by this one particular macro. So this is a really super cool feature, and we also have buttons that we can make assignments to, and again, our XY pads down at the bottom. We'll go ahead and collapse that. If we'd like to remove these assignments, we can click on the wrench icon. Come back to this area, I'll select this bottom input for the DC1, remove that target. Let's select our right input, left input, and take those out. And we'll go ahead and exit out of the edit mode, close out our macro controls, as well as these plugins. Let's also close out our inspector, and we're going to hop over to the mix console. Let's left click, hold, and drag that up a bit. Now we have sends that are available for our channels where we can direct that audio to send effects. Let's come to the browser and let's drag in let's just come to the sends here for this particular channel. I'm going to click on the plus, and we can add an effects channel, and we can see that this is now routed. This send is routed to the effects channel. We can come to the plus, and I can type in, say, analog delay, press enter. That's been added to our send, and we've got our analog delay on this effects channel. But let's right click and remove that effects channel out, and we'll get rid of this send on this channel just to show we have a quicker way to go about this process. So if we'd like to create a send for this device, we can just left click, hold, and drag that to the sends, and then in this way we're going to automatically have our effects channel added, the compressor will be added here, and our channel will be routed as well. So this is going to save us multiple steps, combining those into one simple drag and drop from our browser. Now we can use this slider here, left click and drag left or right, to determine how much of the particular effect that we're using on our effects send is going to be applied to this channel. But another cool feature that we have is the fader flip option. And this is really going to be useful for when you have tons of different channels within your console and you want to work on the send levels for all of them. Say you've got a delay or reverb in here, and you want to manage how much of that delay or reverb, or in this instance the compression, is being applied to multiple channels, although with the compression is not really typical, except for drums maybe. So instead of dragging this for multiple tons of channels that you may have, we can come over to the left here and we have this fader flip button. So when I click once on that, we can see our fader turns green. I'll do that again just in case you didn't see that. Normally we have gray, and we're adjusting the level, the audio level for this channel as it heads to our main out here. But when we activate the fader flip, we're now making use of the send level for our compressor here. So as you can imagine, if you've got tons of different channels here and you want to say manage how much reverb is being applied to all those, you can use the fader flip and then just go through each of your channels and adjust the larger fader down below here instead of this one. Let's go ahead and take that back to the default, and let's close out our compressor, and we'll also close out our browser. Now, another feature that many of my students are not aware of is the meter options here. And let's actually bring in some audio for that. We'll just grab any random thing, drag that in. And when we play this back, let's turn off our inserts as well as our send. Okay, so we can see we've got our meters there, and if I were to right click on this, we have a few options. So we can switch to peak, and we can see our RMS reading, or those two, the horizontal white line is now gone from there. So if you'd like to see RMS readings, you could choose peak RMS. And then now we can see our RMS reading there, and we have some options for the peak hold, the hold length, and pre-fader, post-fader metering. Now let's add a few more tracks here. So I'm going to press T as in Tom, and let's change the count to 4, and I'll just press enter. So now we've got some more channels down here. And I'd just like to talk about solo safe. So when we click on solo for a channel, we can see that these other ones are muted, except for our effects send. But if we have a particular channel that we always want to hear, even if we want to solo our track 1, but we always want to hear, say, our vocal 4, no matter what, no matter which of these other ones we're soloing, we still want to hear this one, we can hold Shift and click on this S here. And now when I click on the solo, we can see that that's going to remain soloed as well. Now our effects channels are automatically going to have this on because typically we'll want to hear the effects sends when we're soloing our other channels. Now if we want to take this off, we can hold Shift, click once. Now we're back to our normal behavior and our vocal 4 is being muted. Now lastly, for the mix console, we've got this wrench icon here with a ton of different useful settings. So if we click once on that, I would just recommend taking a look at these and experimenting here. We're not going to go through all of these. This is going to determine the placement of your channels for your effects, your buses, VCAs, and so on. Linking the visibility of your track list and console, colorizing your channel strips. We can view input controls. We can see those here, and a variety of other options. So this is just something to be aware of and to explore, especially if you're coming from another DAW and the console is not doing what you would want it to do or looking how you would like for it to look. Just come here and you probably will be able to find what you're looking for and make Studio One more similar to whatever DAW you're coming from. Now we also have the same wrench icon at the top of our track column here, and this is going to give us a ton of different options to determine its behavior as well. So like we saw the colorizing the channels, we can colorize our tracks. We can show track notes, track icons, and just a ton of other useful settings to be aware of. And again, that's by clicking on the wrench icon at the top of our track column. Now let's scroll up to the top of our range view and we'll take a look at event effects. So if we were to open up our inspector, and we can see that we have all of these plugins. So I can turn on the compressor here, and this is going to apply to all of the audio events on this particular track. But what if we'd like to apply an effect to, say, just a particular section of this audio event? So first, we need to make a cut for the area that we'd like to add that to. So I'm going to hold Control, and that's going to switch to my split tool. I'll go ahead and click once to make that. Now that we have this separate audio event, I can right-click on it, and we can see we have here Event Effects. So then I'll come down to the bottom and add effect. And then here we have device. I just would like to add one plugin. So I'll come to this first drop-down menu and I'll type in analog for our analog delay, press enter and OK. So now we see our analog delay pops up, and if I play our track back, so we don't have delay here. And let's take the dry wet up so to make this very obvious. Okay, so that got a little bit funky when we took the dry wet up, but I think you get the idea. This analog delay is only affecting this particular portion of our audio event since we've performed that split and added here. Now we can also work with our event effects over in the inspector area here. So let's hover and pull this up a bit. Now we can see we have a section for event effects. If I click on the disclosure arrow, then we can see our analog delay. So if we had closed this and we'd like to access it again, we can double click and bring that back up. We can also click on the render, and then that's going to render the effect or print it to our audio. And you can see it automatically creates a tail, which is going to be important for things like delay and reverb so that we don't cut off the delay or reverb after it's been printed. Now we can also come to the restore button here and click on that. We can see it's changed from render to restore once that has been printed. If I click on this, then we now have access to our analog delay again if we need to make adjustments to its parameters. If we'd like to remove that event effect, then we can come to the drop-down arrow and click on remove. We can also come to this separated event, right-click on it, come to event effects, and actually we don't have a remove here, but if I were to open that up, then I can come up to the top, drop-down menu, and remove from here. Now we saw a moment ago that I was able to hold Control and access the split tool. This is going to be our alternate tool whenever we hold down Control. And the way that we can set our I cannot speak today. The way that we could set that alternate tool is with this little blue line here, and we can change which tool is active by pressing the 1 repeatedly on our QWERTY keyboard, the 1 at the top of our keyboard, not on the number pad. So you can see as I repeatedly press the number 1, then this switches the tools, and now when I hold Control, we switch to the Paint tool. I'll press 1 again, this goes to the Mute tool. When I hold Control, we access the Mute tool, and I can click to mute that. Once I release Control, we switch back to our arrow tool. Now we can also click on this downward facing arrow, and we can select the alternate tool here as well. So I'll go back to the split tool. We can see that our blue line goes there, and when I hold Control, we're back to our split tool. Now, if you have a particular audio event that you've done lots of processing to or editing, and you want to protect that event or events, we can, let's just select this one. I'll right click on it. We have time lock and edit lock. So we'll just go ahead and select both of them. The time lock is going to prevent this event from being moved within the track. So I'm just left click holding, dragging left or right, but it's remaining where it is because of the time lock. Now if I hold Control and access the split tool and I'm clicking, you can see I'm clicking, but nothing is being done to this event because the edit lock is active. Now we can also activate or access those within the inspector. So we need to scroll down in this bottom panel here, and we can see time lock and edit lock. Those are checked because we selected them here, but we can also check and uncheck them here as well. Now that they're deselected, I can move this wherever I'd like on the track, and if I hold Control, I can cut until my heart is content. Now let's take a look at track notes, and you may have an instance where you are using hardware gear. compressor or equalization, and you want to keep a record of the settings that you used, or maybe you want to make a note of the mic that was used for that particular track. So again, we can come to the inspector. It's already open. If it's not for you, you can click on the eye, and let's pull these panels down a bit. And we'll just scroll down in this top panel, and we can see at the very bottom here, we have this little paper and pencil. If I click on this, this is going to open up the track notes area. So I can go ahead and type in information here, whatever you'd like to put in for this particular track. We can also put in notes for the entire song, and then here we have our song info. So just by switching these tabs, we'll come back to our track notes. Now we can see that I added test here, and we'll come back to this wrench icon because I just like to show that we do have the option. If we come down near the bottom, we have show track notes. So I'll click here. Now we can see we have a panel that's going to display what we've put in, and I can actually double click in here and add more text as well. And just click outside to accept that. We can also hover at its border and expand this out like so. If I were to come to the mix console, and we'll go to this wrench icon that we took a look at earlier, we can see that we have channel notes here. So if I go ahead and select that, now we can see what I've added within our console as well. Let's go ahead and deselect there, close out our console, and we will hide the notes here. And while we're talking about tracks, let's talk about the color, because I see a lot of people talk about the colors in Studio One. They want something different. So we can click on these little color bars for our tracks within the track header. And now we've got our color palette that opens up. But what I really want to point out is this disclosure arrow. So if I click once on that, then we expand out, we have this color wheel where we can adjust colors and come up with our own color palette. And that's what I've done here with these kind of pastel colors. We have this load preset, so if we click on this, we can choose from different presets that are available as well. So you can always come through here. Here's the default, and there's a variety of different options. Here's my pastel. So there's actually quite a bit to choose from, and again, you can just use the color wheel to make your own preset. So after you've made adjustments, you can click on the store preset and give it a name. If you'd like more information about creating your own color palettes, I'll leave a link up here. Check that out in the top right corner. And let's go ahead and put my pastel back on, and we'll close that up and exit out of here. And just know that that option is also available for your particular audio events as well. So if I right click here and then click on the color bar, we can access from here as well. Let's undo. And let's move on to take a look at global tracks. So up at the very top here, we have this global track visibility button. Now, most of us are going to be seeing this, but just know that if you hover on the edge of our track column here and pull to the right, then that's going to expand out and we have access to all of the global tracks that are going to be contained within that button. But I'm just going to put this back to how most of the rest of us are seeing this. So with this button here, we can access these global tracks. So this at the very top, the ruler, we're going to add a secondary ruler here. So at the top, we've got bars and beats, which is going to be on by default. But if, for instance, we wanted to see time, we're going to see seconds. So let's left click, hold, and zoom out a bit. So when we come here, we can see we are at bar 36, looking here in the transport, but we can see we're at 1 minute. And for our time display, we can see we're at 1 minute. If you're working with film or composing to film, then we can change this to frames. Now we can see that the secondary ruler is in frames. We could do samples, and then bars is what the top one is already set to. So we'll come back to seconds, and we'll come back to this here, and let's come to our marker track so we can add markers here. So if I position the playback cursor here and click on the plus, we can see our markers added. It's going to be labeled with 2. I'll click here. We can see that that's labeled with 3. If I double click, then we can edit the name. So I can rename this to be whatever I'd like, press enter, and now we can see that it takes on that name. If I right click, I can also, okay, I thought I could change the color, but apparently we cannot. But there's some other options here. We can even choose to stop at that particular marker. If you'd like to remove, just be sure that the playback cursor is still there, and we can click on the minus. I'll come here to number 2 and click on the minus and remove that one out as well. So moving on, we next have the chord track. That's a bit more involved for this tutorial. We're already kind of heading into overtime, so we'll just keep going. We've got our arranger, so if I double click, now we've got, let's zoom in a bit. We've got an intro that's been added. I'll double click after that. We can see we have verse. We can resize these. And if I double click on this, then our playback's going to start there. If I double click on the intro, it's going to start there. If I right click, then here we can change the color. If we'd like, we can double click where it says verse and rename this to be whatever we'd like, press enter, and we have some other options here. Okay, moving on, we now have our lyric track. Again, we can put in lyrics there. That's a bit beyond this tutorial. We've got our video track. We've got our time signature track, so we can set up different time signatures within our song and our timeline. And then lastly, we have our tempo track, where we can create tempo changes for our song. So let's position our playback cursor here, and I'm going to change this to 90 beats per minute, press enter, and actually let's Control Z to undo because I forgot an important step. Let's first click on the plus. We now have a point here, we can see that. Now that we have the point, I'll put in 90, press enter. So now we've got a drop from our 140 for the first 3 bars, and then at bar 4 we're going to drop down to 90. And you can even see within our transport this says 90. If I click in our ruler to come back to bar 1, we can see that this is going to play back at 140. And we'll go ahead and remove these global tracks. Now, something else that comes up a lot of times in my meetings with students is missing files, as well as file management. But let's focus on the missing files aspect. So let's close out our inspector and we'll come over to the browser. And let's come to the files. We'll come to the vocal samples and we'll just drag anything in here. Okay, so if we're going to be bringing or importing audio files from, say, a sample library that we may have our own personal collection, then the default behavior is that Studio One is going to defer to the location of wherever this is located at. It's going to point to it. This song is just going to look for this file in the location that it's stored at on my hard drive. It is not currently in the song folder for this project. So a lot of times what happens is that people will start importing their audio files, then they may move the folder or something gets deleted, and then when they go to open up their song, they get an error message saying that files are missing. And that's something that none of us want to see. So the way that you can prevent that from happening is if we Control and comma or Command comma on the Mac. Let's come to the General tab, actually Locations, and then down at the bottom we see Ask to copy external files when saving document. And I have this checked so that whenever I hit save, Studio One's going to ask me, hey, you brought in this file, you've imported it into the song. Do you want to make a copy of this audio file and put it into the song folder? So everything is going to be self-contained in that one folder. And you don't have to worry about the original location where this is contained being moved or deleted because it's copied into this song folder. So let's click on OK, and let's come to the pool. And we can see it's actually in the pool here, but when I do Control and S to save, you can see that we get this message. Do you want to copy these external files to the media folder? Now the media folder is contained within our song folder for this project. And so even if you check that box, maybe you don't always want to copy everything, but at least you're going to be presented with this. If you had copied or imported multiple audio files, you'll see them listed here. You can select which ones that you'd like to make copies of and put in the song folder, and then you could just click on yes. Now, you may have a ton of songs where you've imported audio files, but you didn't have this setting active. But you'd like to go back to those songs and make the copies and contain everything in one folder. So if you'd like to do that, one thing that we could do, let's Shift and F to exit out of full screen mode, we'll come to song, and then now we can see that we have the option to copy external files. So even if you haven't been using that setting within the preferences menu, you can retrospectively go back to your older songs and make use of this action here to contain everything in one folder. So everything is nice and neat. You don't have to worry about losing your audio files. Okay, now let's come back to the browser and we'll go back to the files section where I dragged in from a second ago. And let's talk about tabs up at the top. We can see we have files, which is going to show your system directory. Then we have Studio One, where you can access your presets and projects, snapshots, and so on for Studio One. And we also have sample library, and most of you are not going to have this here. This is something that I added specifically. So if you have sample libraries of your own that you would like to add at the top for quick access, so you don't have to, say, come to your system directory and then navigate to, say, external hard drives and locate your sample libraries, well, what you can do is, okay, so we're within my sample library. Maybe I want to have vocal samples immediately at the top for quick accessibility. So I can just right click on this, and then down near the bottom we have new tab from here. So just take note, we have Files, Studio One, Sample Library. But once I select the new tab from here, we can see that our vocal samples has been added. So now I can quickly hop to the vocal samples folder if I'd like. If you'd like to remove a tab, then you can just right click on it and then choose Close Tab. So this is a small tip, but it could actually be pretty big and save you a ton of time navigating to find your samples. Now to finish up in the browser, let's come over to the Pool tab again, and if I right click, we have the option to remove unused files. So let's come to this here, this vocal sample that I brought in. I'm going to go ahead and delete that out. Come back to the Pool and let's remove unused files. Okay, so now we have this dialog. These two files are no longer being used in our arrange view. And so here, if we were to go ahead and click on yes, they're going to be removed from the pool, but they're still going to be on your hard drive. Now, if I were to select delete files permanently, then it's going to remove them from the pool as well as our hard drive as well. So you need to be careful with this one. I would only select this if you have copied these to your song folder, that as we saw a few minutes ago. But just know this here, because you don't want to end up with tons of songs on your system and you've got tons of audio files that have been copied, but they're not actually being used in your song, but they're taking up space on your hard drive. This is a nice way to go ahead and manage and clean things up. And I recommend people doing this after you're sure you're finished with your song, just in case anything goes wrong. Then at least you know your song is already finished. But I think this is a really good step to do for when you're archiving and you're totally finished with your songs and you want to kind of tuck them away, but be sure that they're not taking up more space than they need to on your hard drive. So let's go ahead and close out of this window. And let's actually remove some of these tracks here to give us some room. I'll Shift and T to remove those out. Let's come to the Instruments tab, and I'm going to drag in a Mai Tai. And let's just go ahead and choose a pad here. Okay, so we've got, this is a little small tip, but it may be useful for some of you if this has been driving you crazy. So we have a limited number of octaves here that are immediately available to trigger with this virtual keyboard. But if you hover over this area and use your mouse wheel, you can change the particular octaves that are available. Now also, if you hold Control and use your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out to make this virtual keyboard larger or smaller. So maybe not many people are interested, but if you're someone who's been going crazy wanting to change this, I hope this helps. Now let's go ahead and close our Mai Tai. When that was added, we have an instrument track that was created. Anytime we drag in a virtual instrument, the instrument track is going to be created for us. So we've got our Mai Tai on here, and we've heard that. Now, if I were to drag in, say, a presence on top of this same track, we get this dialog asking if we'd like to replace. If we choose that, then the Mai Tai will be replaced and we'll just have the presence. We can just choose keep, and that will just keep the Mai Tai. Or we can combine, if I click on this, then we're going to create a multi-instrument. So basically this track now is going to be triggering both the Mai Tai and the presence. So if I use the virtual keyboard, we're just hearing the Mai Tai, but let's double click on the presence here. This is going to open up our presence, and you can see we're on default, which is no instrument. So let's come to the strings, and we'll come to the cellos, say legato. Okay, so that's been loaded into our presence. We'll close that out. So now that we've actually loaded a preset, we should hear both our Mai Tai and presence at the same time. Okay, so our presence, the cello is there. Let's come to the Mai Tai and take this down a little bit. So by single clicking, we change the channel to adjust the parameters or the level, panning, mute, solo for the Mai Tai. Clicking once on the presence, we then switch to it for its controls. But now we should hear the cello a bit more. And with the presence selected, we can take its fader up. And we can just continue on with layering instruments. So if I click on the plus next to instruments here, let's just type in Hive, I'll press enter. Okay, and we'll just choose another. So now we can hear all three of these virtual instruments playing back at once. So you can really stack your instruments and get a really thick, rich sound if that's something that you're looking for. Now to finish up with the multi-instrument, let's just take a look at the mix console to quickly see what that is going to look like here. So here is our multi-instrument. So we only have one channel, but if we click on the folder, now we can see we have three other channels which represent each discrete instrument. So here's our Mai Tai, here's our presence, and here is our Hive. So if you'd like to make adjustments to levels and panning within the mix console, then we can do that here, which can be a bit more convenient than using or making those adjustments within the multi-instrument window where you need to click once to select each one to adjust their levels and panning. Okay, now let's pull our mix console down a bit and let's go to our presence. So here is the multi-instrument, if I click to show that. Now, another relatively new feature, and this is a small one, but could be useful for you guys. Now, and also this is something that a lot of my students do. They will right-click and remove track, or they will do Shift and T, and that track is now gone. But if you take note here, we still have the presence, the Mai Tai. Our multi-instrument is still there. And we can even see it here. It's a little bit grayed out because when an instrument doesn't have a track associated with it, it's going to be grayed out. But I don't really want to leave instruments that are not being used hanging out in my song. So let's Control Z to undo. Our track is now back. If we right click, we can then choose to remove track and instrument. Now that's going to remove the presence, the Mai Tai, and the Hive. We can see that here. Let's again undo. Okay, but we can also now just hold Shift and delete, and then it's going to remove those out. So I believe they call it Smart Delete. So just a little tiny quick tip that may save some of you time, because when we're working on our music, every little bit that can help shave off seconds and help keep us in the flow and keep us from clicking around so much is going to be helpful. All right, guys, so this went on a little bit longer than I thought, but I hope that you've got some useful information from this. And again, if you're interested in one-on-one training directly with me over Zoom, check out the pinned comment below or the description area of this video. I also provide mixing and mastering services. You can also find more information on that in those areas that I mentioned. And otherwise, we'll wrap up here. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope everything is well with you, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.